I've been looking at the tanks and healers in Legion, trying to figure out what I'm going to main upon release of the expansion. Previously, I ranked all of the tanks in Legion's alpha build, which you can check out by clicking the card in the top right hand corner of the video. And in that video, a lot of people asked me to do a similar thing for healers. So rather than look at Legion's healers from the sole perspective of playing one, I've also considered what it's like to be healed by one as a tank. This approach will hopefully help to balance out my personal biases towards particular playstyles. Hopefully. Right, so without further ado, here's the criteria that I've used to rank all healers in Legion Beta. AoE and single target out-of-the-box spells, AoE and single target talents, artifact ability, which I feel compelled to add given the comments in my previous video. This is the British English spelling of the word and not actually incorrect as many people said. I also looked at utility and fun factor, whatever that means. If you'd like to see my other Legion beta videos, I've added a link to a playlist in the video description box below. Additionally, if you find this video useful, please consider giving it a like so I know it's well received. You can also do an Aussie Sheila a solid by sharing this video with your friends, but only if you want to. Okay, so based on these criteria, here's the executive summary of how I'm subjectively ranking the healers toward the end of Legion beta. So you'll notice I said, again, subjectively, which is why this video doesn't end here, and instead we'll take a more detailed look at why I've ranked them as such. Across the board, you really can't go wrong with healers, and why it may look like I'm copping out saying they're all above average, I really did enjoy them all for one reason or another. So let's take a look at each of the healing specs and talk about my impressions of them. First up, Holy Priest. Holy Priests have definitely assumed the role of pure healer in Legion, with an assortment of solid spells and powerful holy words that synergize with a rather odd artifact ability. Base AoE and single target heals are very nicely balanced in Legion. Each of them feels effective, and every time I use Serenity, I feel almost like pushing an I win button. Holy Talents provide a few new AoE spells, and some buffs to single target abilities. In addition to those, the new spell Apotheosis is absolutely gorgeous and definitely rivals the Protection Paladin's Guardian of Ancient Kings. The artifact ability, granted by Tur, Beacon of the Naru, is Invoke the Naru. Unlike the other healers, it's a passive ability that has a chance of being triggered by any Holy Word spell. The image lasts for 15 seconds, but I didn't really notice it proccing all that often. At this point, I don't feel like I've done enough testing of the ability to be able to say how efficient it is compared to the other healer artifact abilities. Spirit of Redemption, which is buffed by Afterlife, and Guardian Spirit have often been make or break abilities, but with the new spell Symbol of Hope giving all healers the ability to free cast for 10 seconds, having a Holy Priest in your raid is nigh mandatory in Legion. While I do enjoy being able to DPS and heal at the same time, there's something alluring about a dedicated, pure healer. Holy Priests are just so good at what they do, and Symbol of Hope brings along a real team healer vibe. Even though the artifact ability is weird as hell, I didn't feel like I was lacking as a healer, which made me think that perhaps it was proccing more often than I realised. Resto Druids. Someone in my livestream had an awesome analogy for Resto Druids. He said that they're like bringing dinner to the boil without anyone burning alive. With our hots rolling and a smattering of direct heals, I really feel like I'm constantly keeping everyone's head above water rather than the usual whack-a-mole style healing. As a tank, it's more common for me to slowly and steadily lose health and then be brought back up after an extended period of time when this tank is too low point has been reached. With our talent choices, Druids have 3 AoE spells to choose from, each of which is buffed by a variety of talents, and this is the ongoing theme with Druids. Rather than talents providing extra spells and requiring additional key bindings, Legion has opted to spit and polish existing spells, adding flavour to each one. When it comes to single target healing, Druids have a nice selection of hots and direct heals, making them feel well-rounded enough to deal with a variety of situations. Once again, all of these spells are buffed and augmented via talents. Talents at first glance seem cheap compared to other healers who get a plethora of shiny new abilities to add to their action bars. However, this more Spartan approach allowed me to pick and choose what I wanted to beef up based on my own playstyle preferences. AoE spells can be buffed by Spring Blossoms, Soul of the Forest, Inner Peace, and the old crowd pleaser, Mr. Grumpyface the Axebreaker. Single target spells are equally flavoured by Abundance, Moment of Clarity, Cultivation, Germination, and Prosperity, along with Soul of the Forest and good old Bruce the Spruce. The one additional spell we get from talents is the Guardian Favourite Cenarian Ward, which adds a nice hot to the target. The artifact ability, granted by Garnier, the Mother Tree, is called Essence of Garnier. It's on a 90-second CD and supercharges our hots for 8 seconds. Resto Druids bring a nice variety of raid-friendly abilities, including Ironbark, which can be buffed by Stonebark, Innovate, Rebirth, and Tranquility, which is doubly effective in raid environments. Mobility has always been a thing with us trees, strangely enough, and that certainly hasn't changed in Legion. In fact, druids that stand still for long enough start sprouting flowers under their feet, which I can see encouraging more and more Hoppy Bunny syndrome. Resto Shaman. Resto Shamans are not for the incontinent, with their distinctly watery spells and artifact model, and just like water, they're able to contort themselves to fit pretty much any situation, with a solid variety of mana-efficient single-target and AoE heals. Oh, and totems. I love totems. Out-of-the-box AoE spells are the familiar Healing Rain, Chain Heal, and Healing Tide totem. Likewise, the classic Healing Surge, Healing Wave, Riptide, and Healing Stream totem provide highly effective single-target healing. Talent choices provide some interesting AoE spells in the form of Cloudburst totem, Ascendance, and Wellspring, each of which felt fantastic when I used them. For single-target healing, Unleash Life heals the target, while allowing the shaman to choose who benefits from the following nicely buffed heal. This adds an element of control to Resto Shamans that other healers aren't afforded. The artifact ability, granted by Sharasdal's Scepter of Tides, is Gift of the Queen. It's on a 45-second CD and both heals and increases the health of 6 allies. The 2-second cast time made me pick and choose when to use it, but man, it's an effective ability for sure. The tried and true Hero Lust, coupled with Reincarnation and Totems make Shamans valuable raid members and a must-have for raid healing. What I've always enjoyed about Shamans is their versatility, being able to come back from the dead, silencing mobs while CCing others, their collection of stuns and slows, all rolled in with strong single-target and AoE healing and the ability to cast while moving, makes for a really fun healer to both play and be healed by as a tank. Discipline Priest. There are times when I like to stand back and just heal people, and then there are moments when I feel like throwing out some DPS and making that undergeared DK feel inadequate. I mean, when I like to help the group progress more swiftly through an encounter by contributing some moderately impressive DPS. Also, Disco Bubbles. As Disc is all about the atonement, which can be applied to multiple targets with ease, AoE heals is where it's at, and rather fortuitously, the base level spell Powered Radiance also applies atonement. Single target spells include Plea, Shadow Mend, and Penance when running with the talent Penitent. When it comes to atonement-y goodness, Smite, Penance, and Shadowed Pain are the familiar staples of the Disc roster. In order to maintain the atonement buff on party and raid members, Plea, Powered Shield, Shadow Mend, and Powered Radiance all do the job nicely. Pre-pull, I found using a few GCDs to pop Plea on some people to be the most effective way to set the group up for some artifact loving. There's a nice collection of AoE talents, some of which are shared by Holy Priests. Purge the Wicked is spread by Penance, making it useful in AoE fights. I must admit that I struggled with the concept of Shadow Covenant because I personally dislike anything that absorbs healing, but I dare say once everyone is more familiar with encounters, this will turn into a nice little AoE heal. As for Penance as an atonement heal, Castigation adds a nice little AoE component. The single target talent Power Word Solace gives a teeny weeny bit of mana back, and Masochism adds a nice hot to increase our own survivability. The artifact ability granted by the Light's Wrath is Light's Wrath. It's on a 90-second CD and deals radiant damage that is increased by each ally rocking Atonement. With Mass Dispel, an extra body dumping DPS into the boss while simultaneously healing, and the good old disco bubbles, Discipline Priests bring a nice selection to a raiding table. Having mained a Mistweaver in Mists of Pandaria, who I religiously ran as a Fistweaver, and being an Atonement healer in Cataclysm, I have to say I kind of like where Discipline Priests are at the moment. They've really dedicated themselves to the Atonement playstyle, which I personally enjoy. I can understand why others have a differing opinion, but they'll always be welcome at my disco party. As with Holy Paladins, there are times when I've felt more inadequate than some of the other healers, especially when I've been taken out of my wheelhouse and forced to spam single target direct heals on a tank with a death wish. Situations where Atonement just can't keep up with that squishy, chain-pulling, mincemeat shield tank took a bit of a shine off the fist-weaving substitute. Lastly, as a tank being Atonement healed, I have to say it's at times a little scary knowing that a DPS standing in bad could wind up stealing a heal that otherwise would have been for me. I definitely noticed more of a randomness to the heals I received, and coordinating my cooldowns accordingly became a little more challenging. In the end, I wound up using them as I would while soloing, rather than attempting to line them up with healer CDs and buffs. Still, they got the job done and were no less effective than other healers. Holy Paladins. Holy Paladins are all about the self-flagellation. Rarely are they at full health, which as a tank is something I'm still coming to terms with. Normally when I see my melee-based healer taking damage, I wonder if I've not got aggro on everything, or I'm turning cleaving or frontal cone mobs towards melee in the repositioning mumba of AoE tanking. Alas, it's just a Holy Pally doing their thing. Aside from Beacon of Light, Holy Paladin's only base AoE spell is Light of Dawn and has both range and directional restrictions, making it challenging to use in encounters where allies are spread out. Single target abilities are a different story with 6 to choose from, including Flash of Light, Holy Shock, Holy Light, the Lifesaver Lay on Hands, Light of the Martyr, and the crit-dependent passive Infusion of Light, which buffs Holy Light and Flash of Light. Holy Paladins are all about the key bindings. As an Altarholic, I've always tried to have similar key bindings across characters, and I found it quite challenging to accomplish that this time round. Talents for Holy offer a plethora of new abilities to complement existing ones, which is quite different indeed from Risto Druids. In the case of AoE talents, Beacon of the Lightbringer buffs Light of Dawn quite nicely, while Beacon of Virtue allows you to apply Beacon of the Light to multiple allies. In addition to those, Light's Hammer, the various auras, Holy Prison, and Judgment of Light all add AoE flavour to our holy healing. As for single target talents, given the out-of-the-box collection we already have, Bestow Faith and Holy Avenger were more than enough for my key bindings to handle. The artifact ability, granted by the Silver Hand, is Tears Deliverance. It's on a 90-second CD and randomly heals any injured players within 15 yards, while also increasing the effectiveness of Holy Light and Flash of Light on those healed targets. Since the buff offers a nice 20% extra healing, I found it quite important to track where the buff was, given that the ability heals random targets rather than allowing me to choose. In a raiding environment, Paladin Blessings and Auras make for a valuable and effective healer. As I've already said, I'm partial to fist weaving and atonement style healing, so given the fact that monks are not about to fit the bill in Legion, my pally has been a nice substitute. My main concern is how much I feel like a fish out of water when I'm forced to stand at range or I'm unable to hit a mob. As such, there was more of a love-like relationship with my holy friend, depending on what encounter we were facing. Mistweaver monks. Let me start out by saying that Mistweaver has been by far the most challenging healer to test. When healing on them or being healed by them as a tank, I consistently found myself watching the Mistweaver mana bar with an eagle eye. Having said that, I feel like Mistweaver mana usage is at the extreme end of the testing spectrum, and I can envision the likes of priests, shamans and paladins being tweaked to bring them more in line. There are 2 AoE spells that Mistweavers get out of the box: Essence Font and the good old Revival. As for single target abilities, there's the golden oldies Enveloping Mist and Renewing Mist, along with the nucleared on the Legion block Effuse. Mistweaver talents are an interesting beast. Given the nature of healers, whose job it is to keep other people alive, I personally feel like the choices afforded us in Legion are more selfish, if anything. Case in point, an entire tier is dedicated solely to keeping the Mistweaver alive. In terms of AoE talents that benefit others, there are 2 to choose from, and Refreshing Jade Wind provides a nice buff to Essence Font. As for single targets, there are 4 talents to choose from, including the mana-free Mistwalk ability, and the quite effective, not to mention kick-ass looking, Invoke Chi-Ji the Red Crane. Zen Pulse adds a nice bit of AoE DPS, and of course we have old dependable Summon Jade Serpent Statue, which I must admit I've been struggling to come to terms with it being a talent over a base level ability. The artifact ability, granted by Shailun, Staff of the Mists, is Shailun's Gift. It's an interesting ability, wherein 10 seconds after entering combat you gain 1 stack of the gift. A further stack is gained every 10 seconds thereafter, capping at 12. What this affords us is a mana-free heal that we can use whenever we like to varying degrees of effectiveness. I didn't really have one way of using it. On some encounters I used it almost every 30 seconds, and on others I was sitting at 12 stacks several times throughout the fight. The beautiful thing about this ability is the level of control we have over it, which I personally really enjoyed. Mistweaver monks bring the useful tank saver Life Cocoon to raid environments, making them ideal tank healers. As mentioned before, mana is the biggest issue I found with Mistweavers. My personal preference for mana usage is that I want to be using it, but when it starts to affect the survivability of those in my care, I find it becomes more of a frustrating distraction than anything. As it stands, I feel that Mistweavers are not getting as much bang for their buck. My ideal healing situation is when I'm running on fumes just as the boss dies. As of now in the Legion beta, chain-pulling trash feels like watching an egg timer count down, quite rapidly leading to the inevitable comment, at a time when all the other healers just keep on trucking. On the bright side, I did notice that Mistweavers scale quite efficiently with gear, making those sacrifices to RNGesus all the more important. And that about sums it all up. Hopefully you found some useful information in here. If you liked this style of ranking video, I've put a Legion playlist in the video description which contains other ranking videos that you might enjoy. Thanks for the company. As always, enjoy the rest of your morning, day, afternoon, evening, whatever the case may be, and I'll hopefully see you next time.